Good evening, everyone. My name is Terry Eichel, and I work with the Interreligious Eco-Justice Network, a faith-based environmental group in Connecticut. I'm so glad you're here this evening. I would like to first open with IREGN's land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that Connecticut, Algonquin for land on the Tidal River, is the traditional home of Mohegans, Pequots, and many other tribes. We are grateful for our Native people's care for their home and will strive to preserve it for the next 7 generations. IREJN works with the religious communities in Connecticut on environmental issues, with a special focus on environmental issues that intersect with areas of need or inequity. For example, we help them implement energy efficiency and clean energy projects. We help faith communities plant vegetable gardens, pollinator gardens, and fruit trees. And we help with advocacy efforts in support of strong environmental policy. I'm very pleased to be co-hosting this webinar on the rights of nature with the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology, an international leader on the intersection of faith and the environment. This is our first webinar of 2026, and I'm really glad you've joined us. We have a wide range of webinar topics on our website, and you can find recordings of past webinars at irejn.org under resources, and the recording for this webinar will also be there. I'm really excited about this evening's presentation. The rights of nature aligns with the sacred texts of religions around the world. The idea that nature itself is sacred and loved by the Creator is a universal belief. But while the rights of nature may sound obvious, most people probably don't understand exactly what it means, what it looks like, and how it can be implemented. Luckily, we have two great presenters this evening. Tyler Mark Nelson is the program director of the Living Earth Community, a newly launched program at the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology. Living Earth Community is an evolving knowledge common which fosters dialogue between science, law, spirituality, and humanism to evoke wonder and inspire action towards biodiversity conservation. Holding a master's from Yale University and a bachelor's from Whitworth University, Tyler specializes in religion and ecology, ecotheology, animal studies, and climate justice. He enjoys life with his wife, sharing meals with community, outdoor recreation, collecting and listening to music, and photography. After Tyler, we will get to hear from college senior Juniper Lee, who will be graduating this spring from Fort Lewis College. Juniper's water justice class, led by their professor Becky Clausen, led a successful effort to protect the Animas River in Durango, Colorado, culminating in the passage of a resolution last fall. Their story is one of hope and one that I think will provide everyone tonight with some light. After the presentations, we'll have a moderated Q&A. Please put your questions in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll get to them at the end. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to give the floor to Tyler, who will then be followed by Juniper. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you, Terry, for that great welcome, and to Juniper for being here. I'm so excited to be on this panel with the two of you, the three of us, and everybody else who is joining in tonight or today, wherever you may find yourself. So let me share my screen. There we are. Does this look good, Terry and Juniper?
Looks great.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, well, you introduced me better than I could have, so thank you for that. I direct the program, I direct the Living Earth Community program at the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology, which we were so excited to launch this last October 2025. We spent a year and a half putting together this program, developing a vibrant and in-depth website that combines these resources in law, science, humanism, spirituality, and I'll say more on that in a little bit. And also, I'm grateful to be representing the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology today, which sets its mission to inform and inspire people to preserve, protect, and restore the Earth community, and doing so in partnership with the religions of the world who transmit ecological and justice perspectives through their scriptures, rituals, contemplative practices, but also through their moral and ethical commitments. And so moral power, moral energy is what permeates so much of what I will be presenting on today. So here's the presentation pathway. We will begin with a brief word about the Living Earth community as a sort of umbrella, if you will, or we could just say it's starting at a planetary level, a vision for what it is to exist on Earth, not just as humans or within our own species, nationalities, religion, or so on, but as one member of a broader community that also co-inhabits Earth. Then I'll go into Earth law, also known as Earth jurisprudence. And finally, I will wrap up with rights of nature. I will be giving some examples around the world of how this rights of nature movement has spread and taken creative root through different legal and philosophical pathways. Living Earth community. So the Living Earth community is this idea that, well, let me just get to the quote here because this says it so much better than I could. Thomas Berry, the great cultural historian, he termed himself a geologian, a student or studier of Earth. He said that the universe is a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. Now, what does he mean by that? A communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. Well, he was looking at the post-Enlightenment world, the different cultural narratives, the economic principles, political and legal systems, and so on, and recognized how there's this nasty separation of humans as being separate from and superior to the rest of the species on Earth, but also rather not just lifting humans above the others, but actually lowering all other species, all other matter itself to a sort of inert, lifeless level, this collection of objects. But what the Living Earth community, a term that he and others have been using, what this Living Earth community envisions is a planetary community, which recognizes, in partnership with contemporary science, with different forms of ecological wisdom and indigenous forms of knowledge, and so on, it recognizes that Homo sapiens are not the only sentient, conscious, agential, or decision-making, or creative species of life on Earth. It recognizes that the planet is a single community of interdependent and differentiated subjects. Those are some $5 words there, multi-syllabic words. Interdependent and differentiated. Interdependent, recognizing that we could not exist without the other, and vice versa. The trees around us help us to breathe as we breathe back with them. The microbiome in my own gut, where there are more microbial beings within me than there are humans on Earth, they depend on me to be feeding this body of mine, but I depend on them to be organizing and working in their own ways to keep me alive. And so interdependence is this, this understanding of mutual or reciprocal relationships. And then differentiated subjects. Differentiated is a fancy way of saying different, unique, speciated. The forms of intelligence across Earth are just so incredible. A dog's sense of smell makes this dog unique and equipped for dog life. And humans, we have this imaginative capacity in our mind that has come through the evolutionary process. And so much more to be said on that. I will plug our website real quick, thelivingearthcommunity.com, where you can learn more about this. And it's separated into 3 branches: intelligences of nature, ecological worldviews, and Earth law, which I will be moving to shortly here. Intelligences of Nature touches on what I just shared. It's a gathering of scientific and humanistic studies and literature that explore what it means for members of the Earth community to be sentient or to have emotional capacity or the affective ability to respond to the world around them, as well as conscious and an awareness of the world around, and perhaps even an awareness within themselves, and as well as relational and communicative. There are many different ways to communicate, and it's not just verbal or written or bound within our own species. Ecological worldviews showcases a diversity of spiritual and philosophical traditions that affirm and celebrate and seek to live in harmony with this Earth community. So this would be everything from animism to nature-based education, pantheism, and on down the list, deep ecology and so on. And then Earth law. This is why we're here tonight, right? Earth law and rights of nature. It's this global movement that includes expressions like rights of nature, indigenous legalities, science law, partnerships to pursue ecological protection and justice for both the human and the more than human communities. And a quick look at the website. Again, so many resources here. We're just fostering dialogue and celebrating the many, many voices around the planet on all continents and seas who are engaged in this work of Earth law. So we just love to platform what others are doing, partner with them, and see where this goes, because biodiversity loss, food system collapse, and so much more threatening the entire Earth community. And so Earth law is, I think, one of the most hope-filled ways of addressing that. Let's get to it. Earth law. Earth law seeks to protect the integrity of the more than human world. More than human is a tricky phrase for some folks. It's a term that was coined by David Abram in his 1996 book, The Spell of the Sensuous. David Abram is an ecologist, anthropologist, a philosopher. And this idea of the more than human is not a statement of value or worth. It's not flipping this hierarchy that some ways of human thinking have constructed and saying, all right, well, if we've placed humans as superior to all the rest of Earth, more than human is just flipping that and retaining a hierarchical model. And that's false. More than here indicates the beyond, the other species, the rivers, mountains, matter even. So Earth law seeks to protect the integrity of the more than human. It recognizes and honors these differences among species and subjects, recalling again this living Earth community that sees subjects gathering in community rather than lifeless objects and then the humans. Earth law is distinct from environmental law. They're related, absolutely. However, you'll see that Earth law and then rights of nature do have their own distinctions. Earth law affirms nature's value beyond human utility. So often, environmental law can still remain entrenched within these worldviews or these philosophies that regard the more than human, regard landscapes and forests and waters as only as valuable as their use for humans, or only as valuable as they may turn a short-term profit. So Earth law breaks from that and actually confronts that. And it also emphasizes the legal recognition of rights. Moving ahead here, some defining characteristics of Earth law. 25 minutes is not a whole lot of time to really jump in. And so I'll do a 10,000-foot view of Earth law and then move into rights of nature with a little more detail. So one of the characteristics of Earth law is that it is ecocentric. It's a direct contrast to anthropocentrism or human-centeredness in the way that we view the world, relationships, and so on. It contrasts to the property paradigm, which is based off a sense of ownership or possession, mastery, or in the worst cases, domination. And in tandem with that, capitalocentric law, law or systems which are their primary concern is capital, or primary concern is use value to benefit the humans, regardless of the cost to whatever other subject is being exploited for that. It recognizes interdependence and the intrinsic value. Notice here, I'm saying it recognizes. It's not bestowing intrinsic value as if humans were the ones to deem this subject as having value, this as not. But instead, it recognizes what is already inherent to the subjects around us. It is informed by the earth, and it is informed by indigenous wisdoms. So earth is the primary source of the laws and guidance. By studying the earth systems, by recognizing the relationships, the ecological life that is bursting around us, this is our primary guide to determining what sort of ecocentric law would benefit the more than human as well as the human. We recognize that the earth provides interconnected systems for life to flourish. And if flourishing life is our goal, then we ought to be learning from this planet that we co-inhabit. And then the indigenous wisdom. For millennia, indigenous peoples around the world have demonstrated what it is to live according to ecological principles and knowledge of local ecosystems and ecological relationships. There's a sense of multi-generational thriving. You may have heard before the phrase of planning for the seventh generation, looking into the future generations and wanting to leave this planet, this region, in a better state for them when they finally emerge. And to note, indigenous peoples are not monolithic. There is a beautiful variety across geographic, cultural, and many different traditional ways of being. And so the indigenous wisdom teaches us the relationship between land and species, not just, again, use value or how to turn a profit from that, but instead recognizes these relationships as sacred. And in order for all to thrive, in order for all to move forward and emerge on the journey that we're on, it must involve reciprocity, a giving of oneself to another and a receiving of the other. Robin Wall Kimmerer's recent book, The Service Berry, would be a great place for you folks in the audience to begin if you're curious about this topic. And finally, the other characteristic is that it's transformative. It's an emerging framework that draws on both indigenous and scientific knowledge, and it rises to meet the needs of the larger community of life. It's not just a call to wonder and marvel at the world around us, though please certainly do that. It's also a call to action that we may learn, restore, heal, and lean into our roles within the Earth community, and then act to protect and preserve it and celebrate biodiversity in whatever capacity or mode that we are able. Here's Thomas Berry again, who wrote that every component of the Earth community, living and non-living, has 3 rights. The first is the right to be, then the right to habitat or a place to be, and third, the right to fulfill its role in the ever-renewing processes of the Earth community. And what I love about Thomas Berry's thinking on Earth law, Earth jurisprudence, is that he's not viewing this he's not trying to transpose human rights onto non-human beings. Instead, he says elsewhere that, quote, every being has rights to be recognized and revered. Trees have tree rights. Insects have insect rights. Rivers have river rights, as Juniper will be speaking on later. Mountains have mountain rights. So too with the entire range of beings throughout the universe. And so it's this recognition that Rights are relative to the species, rights are relative to the subjects. And this is where, again, this thinking of the Earth community is so generative in partnership with ecological lessons and indigenous forms of wisdom. Here are the three rights that he just mentioned. The right to exist, or in other words, not to be threatened or driven to extinction. We are living through the sixth mass extinction event, where the background rate of extinction is 1,000 times greater in some cases than usual. Our species, and not just our species, but certain forms of being, certain ways of operating on Earth are so out of sync with the limitations and the systems of this planet that our industry and our activity is leading to untold amounts of extinction. So why not have the right to exist? The right to healthy habitats. This one I think is pretty straightforward. And then the right to participate in the regenerative processes of the Earth community. Maybe approaching the negative of that would be helpful. What if we were to remove one species from a local ecosystem? Well, that would lead to some pretty harmful effects. What if we were to remove the water cycles from forests? What if we were to remove one species of stingless bee in the Amazon? And remember that, because I'll be returning to that later in this presentation. Removing one species of bee in one bioregion would lead to the total collapse of food systems for humans and more than human. And so the right to participate and integrate into the ecosystem is, I think, what Barry is getting to here. Now, let me pause for a moment because I'm throwing a lot at you. Isn't this a great vision for collective well-being? The right to exist, the right to exist in a healthy habitat, the right to participate within that habitat and see it emerge in these different relationships through which we move. Isn't that something that you too would hope to have as a basis for your own life and the lives of your family, your friends, your neighbors, and your community? What would happen if one of these were stripped from you, one of these rights? If you were to lose the right to exist, that would be pretty awful, or the right to a healthy habitat. And here the point I'm getting to is that the tragic reality that we face is that not even our own species is able to ascribe this to everyone. We humans struggle to offer these rights to members of our own kind. And this is again where the disconnection from our neighbor, or disconnection from our more than human neighbor, the forms of greed or arrogance, and then these cultural narratives or philosophies which reward again this greed and arrogance, but domination, violent hierarchy, death-dealing industry, and so on. These things ought to be challenged so that the rights that we humans and the more than humans have inherently are able to be recognized and embodied. And soon in this presentation, you'll find that human and more than human rights are in fact intertwined. It's impossible to separate them because it's impossible to separate any one individual from the collective. And here's just a great thing to celebrate. This is a graphic from the Eco-Jurisprudence Monitor, which you can find online. This group monitors ecocentric legal initiatives around the world. And as of today, there are 651 initiatives across 58 countries. That's amazing. Notice too that we're speaking about oceans, seas, waterways, as well as frozen slabs of ice down in Antarctica. So Eco-Jurisprudence Monitor, I highly recommend you check them out. So as I wrap up on Earth law, excuse me, I want to conclude with that, just to state that this vision for Earth law and its various cultural expressions are growing worldwide. through an impressive range of legal theories and practices. Initiatives like rights of nature, indigenous-led movements, science law partnerships, and so on are accomplishing these changes through various modes, such as case law, policy development, international declarations of rights, constitutional amendments, and more. And so this is really an exciting area to explore in your own time. And it's an emerging movement in pursuit of ecological justice for both the human and more than human communities. Now that we've journeyed from the Living Earth community as a vision of this planetary coexistence into Earth Law as an exciting movement across the world, we're now looking at one form, and a quite popular form of Earth Law, and that is rights of nature. So just to draw a quick distinction between Earth Law and rights of nature as a reminder, Earth Law recognizes that the more than human world, or the other members of the Earth community, already hold rights and intrinsic value. Rights of nature, then, is a movement which grants legal recognition of rights through the authority of legal systems and frameworks. So Earth Law recognizes that the rights are already inherently present. Rights of nature, then, is working with existing and innovative legal frameworks to then grant legal recognition of rights. Both have the similar attention to intrinsic value as opposed to use value. And here, because I'm a word nerd, I want to say a quick word about nature. Now, here we're not trying to separate humans from the rest of the world. This dualistic philosophy or ideology that sees humans as separate from the world and then the rest of nature here has wrought untold problems, not least of all destruction, death, and so on, caused by ecological and climate disruption. Rights of nature is not a perfect phrase because of these popular cultural narratives from the Enlightenment, which sees a dualistic view. It separates humans from nature. But on the ground, rights of nature works because it reveals that humans never actually were separate from nature, that we are one member of nature's community, you might say. So some quick moments of development in rights of nature. This doesn't do justice to the individuals and communities over the decades that have been working on this. But I just wanted to highlight a few here. The indigenous ways of knowing and being and relating, or indigenous cosmology, we might say. This is the understanding that the human and the more than human are interconnected, that all life is interdependent upon one another. And so humans are not separate from or superior to other beings. Instead, we are related to through the evolutionary process, or as different indigenous communities would call them, kin, a being with whom we journey together, who has intrinsic values and rights. And now, rights isn't really a word that is used in many different indigenous modes of legality, because why ascribe rights to those beings who already have intrinsic value and they have their own forms of rights or their own integrity to exist and to thrive? However, rights language is often used when dealing with courts because that's the language of the courts and modern legal systems. And then early environmental ethics. Of course, John Muir spoke on the intrinsic sacred value and challenged the economic utility value. And Aldo Leopold's land ethic from his 1949 book, A Sand County Almanac. And he said there that a thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It's wrong when it tends otherwise. Then in 1972, Christopher Stone, who is a legal scholar at the University of Southern California, posed a question to his class, which he then wrote an article about, which he then turned into a book. called Should Trees Have Standing? And it was this single question that birthed and inspired a diverse range of rights of nature movements. Now, of course, there's so many more here who could be named and ought to have been listed. We could spend 25 minutes speaking on each one. Gaia Foundation, the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, also known as GARN, Earth Law Center, the Moth Project at NYU Law, or More Than Human Rights Project. So I wanted to move us into some case studies, just some examples here. I believe I have 5 examples before I wrap up that give you a sense of the diversity, the range of expressions of the rights of nature movement as it takes place around the world. And we would be amiss if we did not begin in Ecuador. Ecuador in 2008 changed its constitution to include rights of nature. It became, in fact, the first country in the world to enshrine the rights of nature in its national constitution. And this not only was an important legal celebration, but what's even more remarkable is that this reform was rooted in the Andean indigenous worldview of Pachamama, or Mother Earth, as well as the principle of Sumak Kase, which is Quechua for the good way of living. And you'll see at the very bottom of this page, good way of living is actually included in this constitutional reform. I won't read this. I highly encourage you to read the Ecuadorian constitution yourself. But the fact that there's the partnership of indigenous cosmology or indigenous wisdom with scientific knowledge, and then legal frameworks all coming into conversation, just really remarkable that this occurred in 2008. And from there, it burst forth in many other continents, such as Aotearoa, New Zealand, which has 3 different acts that have passed just in the last decade. There is the Taranaki Manga, which this volcanic mountain in the courts now actually owns itself. That's not the language that I think we would want to use, but it has its own integrity and is given legal recognition to preserve that. And it is also represented by the local Maori peoples, who were key in moving forward this legal initiative. So that occurred just in 2025, this past year. Also with that, similar to Ecuador, this recognizes the Maori worldview, which understands the more than human world, including mountains and rivers, as being ancestors, living beings, and to have an inherent sacredness, intrinsic value. In 2017, the Wanganui River was recognized as, and I'm quoting here from the New Zealand Parliament, Wanganui is an indivisible and living whole, comprising the Wanganui River from the mountains to the sea, incorporating all its physical and metaphysical elements. And the Parliament also declared that it has all the rights, duties, and liabilities of a legal person. That's rights of nature happening right there. Earth law recognizes the rights that already exist in each person. Then rights of nature is working with legal systems to then recognize and ascribe legal personhood, legal rights. And finally here, the Te Uraia Forest, it's an act that passed in 2014, which strengthened the connection between the local indigenous peoples, the Tuhu, with the forest, which they have known as their ancestral homes for ages. This act also preserved the natural features, beauty, and integrity of its indigenous ecological systems and biodiversity, and also sought to preserve its historical and cultural heritage, providing access to the forest as an inspiration for all peoples, human and more than human. In Peru, this one's so exciting. The Amazonian stingless bees are recognized in the courts as legal persons. This happened just this past year. So Satipo is the largest province in Peru, and under the leadership of the Ashaninka, who are an indigenous peoples of the mountainous Amazonian region, um, they worked with local Peruvian government to adopt the Satipo Declaration of Rights of the Amazonian stingless bees. It's the first time, actually, that this native stingless bee is recognized as subjects of legal rights. Remember, I mentioned them earlier in this presentation. And here's why I think they're such a great example of the rights of nature movement. For generations, the Ashaninka have recognized the interdependent relationship between stingless bees and a healthy ecosystem, as well as the significant threats which endanger these essential pollinators today. If this one species of stingless bee were to disappear, then the local food and economic systems would collapse. And that's why the Satipo Declaration clearly states that, quote, the rights of stingless bees of the Peruvian Amazon are intrinsic and inseparably connected with the human rights and welfare of present and future generations, end quote. Here we see that human and more than human rights are intertwined. Rights of nature, and with it earth law, are ecological and social movements which are expanding across the globe, often led by indigenous communities like the Ashaninka, who demonstrate how to live in ways that honor the integrity of their multi-species community. The River Aethiope Rights Act of 2019 was a joint initiative between the River Aethiope Trust Foundation and the Earth Law Center. It exists as a draft still. It has not been fully passed, but why it's so important to understand, or why it's important to understand its importance. Boy, words. This was the first act to recognize an African river's intrinsic rights to flow in a sustainable ecosystem. It's a draft law currently seeking to grant legal rights to the River Aethiope in Nigeria. And what it seeks to do is recognize and grant through legal means the right to flow unimpeded, to maintain natural biodiversity, and to undergo restoration when harmed. It also prioritizes the rights and interests of local communities. And the last one here is Antarctica, a cold place where no more than 4,000 humans have lived at one time. And yet this place impacts our whole species, as well as the entire Earth community. The Declaration of the Rights of the Antarctic was brought about by the Antarctic Rights Working Group, which was a coalition of folks from the Antarctic Rights, the Wild Law Institute, GARN, Earth Law Center, so on. And they presented the draft of this declaration, which seeks to recognize Antarctica as an autonomous, rights-bearing entity with a voice in decision-making that affects it. It's an effort, this effort is part of a movement to establish new ecocentric governance to protect Antarctica's unique ecosystems from the very real pressing threats of extraction, climate collapse, and other forms of exploitation. To draw this to a close, I would like to just ask a few things of you. I would love for you to spend some time this week envisioning how your city, state, or bioregion might be transformed if you or your local organizations were to begin calling for an earth law approach to certain issues. How would your community benefit from the recognition of the rights of nature? And then what is one step that you can take this week to begin working towards ecocentric law? It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be formal. However, it has to be filled with this vision of a living, vibrant Earth community among whom we are but one member. And yet our role and our responsibility is key for the thriving and the future of the entire planetary community. So thank you so much for listening to this presentation. If you'd like to learn more, you could visit livingearthcommunity.com or the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology's website. for.yale.edu. And we would love to hear from you. Feel free to send us an email at info@livingearthcommunity.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Tyler. That was really beautifully said. And thank you so much for having me here today. I'm feeling a lot of gratitude and excitement that I get to be able to share to all of you about the rights of the Animas River on behalf of my classmates, myself, my community, and Fort Lewis College. And I am actually going to share my screen right now. All right. All right. So I'd like to start this off by sharing a little bit about how the project really began. Dr. Becky Clausen is a professor here at Fort Lewis College in the sociology department. And her background and passion for ecology and sociology kind of led to the development of a class called Water Justice. And that's really what this project and initiative is rooted in, is justice. Fall of 2025 was the third time that Professor Clausen taught water justice. And the class kind of started off with a reflection of the water bodies that meant the most to us as students. And you can see that here on that image to the left. We visualized through art the bodies of water that we resonated with, grew up near, whether that was a swimming hole, an irrigation ditch, or a favorite section of a rafting trip on the river. As the class progressed, we started to study some literature pertaining to justice and water-related justice movements, such as Water Bodies, which is a collection of poetry and prose and first-person narration that gave us as students some insight into the multiple and vast ways of knowing water. We learned about the animacy of water through Robin Wall Kilmer's Braiding Sweetgrass. We learned about the health and wellness that is associated with water, and the management of water as a resource in Western civilization. And then additionally, we spent a month visiting the same body of water at the same area, and that's that image there on the right. That's the Animas River. And we journaled and reflected, and through art, kind of observed how the river changed in flow, in seasonality, temperature, time of day. And we also reflected on how we felt connected to it, not only as a resource and an integral part of Durango, Colorado, and as well as the downstream neighbors that it provides to. But we also reflected on it as a living, breathing entity. Animus in Spanish means soul. And we felt that the soul of the river should be recognized and considered in decision-making, and that the conversations pertaining to Earth systems should be at the center of our decisions for City Council and for community members involved in the conversations that concern it. So this foundation and connection to place laid the way for us to begin thinking about what it would mean to deliver justice to the Animas via rights of nature, and thinking about what that would look like logistically. So considering all of our students' vast, unique talents and backgrounds, passions, and different skill sets, we created and joined a few different working groups. And the first of that being local government, fostering a town and gown relationship. This is the group that I was a part of for the most part. public engagement and outreach. This was an initiative that was really important to us, and it required collaboration from the entire class as a whole. So we all kind of collaborated on that. Communications, developing our message and our goal, data collection, the survey that we gave out to residents, stakeholders, and community members, and case study and literature review, as well as a graphic design team. And that logo there in the corner on each slide is designed by them. They did really, really beautiful work, and I think it represents the project very well. They also turned those into stickers that we gave out kind of as an incentive to take our survey. And they also designed flyers, which the whole class collaborated in hanging up around campus to spread the word. So as we proceeded throughout this process, we came to an understanding and the realization that we could not have these conversations without acknowledging the history of exploitation from mining at the headwaters of the Animas and the threats that it faced because of this. The Bonita Peak Mining District is the Animas River's headwaters are located within this district. And the map there, taken from USGS, the black pinpoints are Superfund sites within the boundaries of the watershed. And in the Bonita Peak Mining District, in 2015, the Gold King mine spill occurred. And it really coincided that 10-year anniversary with our resolution. And we felt it was key to mention. The Gold King mine spill was a mass release of wastewater. And it released into a tributary of the Animas, Mineral Creek, which is an image up there that I took from Mineral Creek. And you can see there's lingering effects of mining contamination. There's like a thick yellow substance that coats the entire stream bed. And it's an iron oxide coating. It's kind of like, thick and yellow. And then there's a white substance on the rocks along the banks of the stream, which is an aluminum precipitant that precipitates from the water column and condenses onto the rocks. And I have some background in this from last semester, working on a collaborative research project where we studied the heavy metal mobilization patterns following a flooding event in a historic mining town of Silverton, Colorado. The Gold King mine spill was not necessarily super ecologically harmful as it may have appeared, but it really gave people a visualization of the threats that face the Animas and the impacts that upstream systems have on our downstream neighbors. The effects of the Gold King mine spill were felt throughout 3 states, and I think that the wastewater made its way all the way down to Lake Powell and just turned the whole river along the way a bright orange, and it led to us rethinking ecocentric and justice-oriented approaches to protecting our natural systems. Another group studied previous legislation that had similar goals to our project. And I think the automatic lights just turned off, but that's okay. The first case study that we looked into was in Ridgway, Colorado, on the Uncompahgre River. And it was really helpful for us to have some guidance within our own state. This was something we looked back on a lot, especially when generating a resolution that we would present to City Council. And we looked at a few, that group looked at many similar resolutions passed both, within the United States and then outside of it. And as Tyler kind of touched on, we also felt it was really important for us to study the Indigenous initiatives in this realm because we recognize that this is while it may be emerging into the mainstream, it's not new. Rights of nature is grounded in the worldview of many Indigenous groups. And we also looked, because of that, we looked at the Snake River in Montana. The Nez Perce tribe passed a resolution recognizing the rights of the Snake River in 2020. It was really important for us that we, throughout this process, that the community felt engaged, informed, and respected. We attended city council office hours to commune with the city councilors so that they were well informed about the goals of our project and the outcomes that we hoped for, as well as kind of ascertaining the scope of city council in decision making. This resolution also coincided nicely with the Fort Lewis College Water Week, and we were able to do a lot of outreach in that way, speaking to community members and other stakeholders, as well as nonprofits within the community, such as Mountain Studies Institute. We also shared at Fort Lewis Water Week, we shared surveys and passed out stickers to Colorado Water Conservation Board. They held a kind of a forum conference that we went to and spoke with students and community members about the kind of current rights or water law, such as like prior appropriation within the state of Colorado. And then also how our initiative was kind of taking a more ecocentric approach to water conservation and management. And because of this outreach, we were able to collect data from 70 participants. The outreach team did a really amazing job of compiling all this data and making sense of it. We've discovered that 98% of the people that took our survey agreed with the following statements. And I won't read all of these, but they are important in our resolution and they're included in the next slide. We felt that it was important that the community members had understanding of what we intended to put into the resolution and that they understood it. And yeah. So this is kind of just a overview of our resolution, and I have it linked in here below, which hopefully you can access from the PDF that I think Terry will give out if anyone is interested in perusing it. We would absolutely love it if it inspired or informed other initiatives regarding the rights of nature. Yeah, and so the culmination of that whole process led to our class kind of outlining 5 rights that we felt were important to the Animas River. And the first of that being the right to flow free and flourish, the right to support essential functions within the watershed, to maintain integrity of the natural cycles and provide adequate habitat for plants and animals, to be free from pollution and other harms, and the right to river restoration and preservation. These rights are great, but we also wanted actionable and tangible responsibilities that we could impose the city of Durango to uphold. And yeah, we've included these. The first being that we asked them to develop policies and programs necessary to recognize the rights of the Animas River, to oppose or mitigate actions or activities that would clearly violate these rights, and to coordinate with the Fort Lewis College Four Corners Water Center to prepare a yearly report for the health of the Animas River for the community and for decision makers. Yeah, and so November 18th, 2025, we finally made it onto the docket at a city council meeting. And although we couldn't all be there with them, We were holding them in our thoughts. I know I was working that night and I just could not focus on anything else. We were all with them in our hearts and our collective efforts throughout the semester. They did an incredible job of presenting to City Council. It's quite an intimidating setting, and I think 4 or 5 students went. They presented a slideshow that was kind of similarly formatted as this one, and it was a collaborative effort from all of us based off of our working groups and our certain areas of expertise. And it passed unanimously, which was just like the most incredible thing ever. We told ourselves that we wouldn't get super attached to the outcome, and that the process was really just what we were, most focused on, so that we could give our full effort to that. But obviously, we were all hoping for them to pass it, and unanimously it did. Some of the city councilors gave statements that they, through this, they've kind of understood and reconnected with the importance of the Animus to them and to itself, just to exist and to flourish. So that was really amazing. It was such an incredible process to be a part of. This was a part of our presentation to City Council, and I felt that it was important to include here. The core essence of our resolution was water is life. To et aina, mini wachoni, agua es vida. These sentiments have been long represented across many languages and cultures, and we were just so honored to acknowledge it in this way. So what's next? The most important and impactful part of this process to me, personally, has been the feeling of momentum, of mobilization, seeing the ripple effect that this resolution had both regionally and nationally. We've all been feeling really passionate about continuing this work. This screenshot here is just kind of a visualization of the fact that the citizens of Durango are interested in learning more about the Animas River, and particularly the certain issues and threats that it faces. As I mentioned, one of the parts of our resolution was that we would produce, Four Corners Water Center would produce an annual report for the health of the Animas watershed. And I'm collaborating with them in this semester for my senior research project to kind of come up with a template for that report. And I'm really interested in synthesizing the needs of the community, of the organizations that are actually conducting that monitoring, and of decision makers, in a way that we can make it the most impactful and meaningful long term. And Earth Law Center, as Tyler mentioned a couple times, Grant Wilson, the executive director of Earth Law, was a really important part of our starting this process. And he continued to give support and advice for kind of how to approach City Council and the structure. And it was really great to have someone from a legal background in our corner. And me and another student from the water justice class have just started internships at Earth Law. It's been a really incredible experience so far to have a professional setting to develop rights of nature and develop rights of the Animas River. We are leading this. Me and Lillian, the other student at Earth Law, are conducting and kind of coordinating an event for the Durango Earth Day, where we'll be doing some outreach and education for rights of the Animas River, and hearing from the community about what kind of things that would be most meaningful for them to include in a report that we would produce. And then this image on top here is just kind of that was the last week or so of the semester. It was a really important time for us to reflect and debrief the process. It was a special time to share food and to reflect on the process and kind of plan for the future of rights of the Animas River. Yeah, it's been really incredible to, I feel like sometimes in academia, in environmental work, the semester comes to an end and you submit that last assignment, and it kind of feels like the project is over in some cases, but that's not the case with this one, and we're excited to keep things moving with it. So thank you so much. I have my email down here below if anyone is interested in has any more questions.
Oh yeah, thank you so much, Tyler and Juniper. That was so great. It's like so inspiring to hear what is being done, what can be done, the possibilities, and just sort of this international recognition of Earth law and rights of nature, and seeing it in a practical application so recently is super exciting. So, folks, if you have questions, you can put it in the chat. You can put it in the Q&A. I have some questions to kick us off. So, I guess one of the things I wondered is, Juniper, what was the most powerful tool for getting the community on board?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think really the fact that we were coming at this as youth and as students who we had, the purest kind of intentions. I don't think that I think that sometimes rights of nature initiatives can be if they're too aggressive perhaps, or they can scare off decision makers, or kind of with the understanding that there might be some sort of ulterior motive or agenda, and we were coming at it really just as that we were seeking justice, and this was a learning experience that we wanted a tangible outcome from, and I think that was really important for involving the community, and the fact that we did do so much outreach at certain events, and we really cared about what the community had to say.
And are there efforts at other city councils along the Animas River to do the same thing? Like, is that how it works, or could work?
I'm not aware of any right now, but we certainly hope that the efforts that we put in could lead to something like that.
Awesome. Diane Lantaka said this is a very inspiring presentation. I knew it would be. I knew it would be. And so here's the flip side, and this is for both of you. So specifically, Juniper, did you encounter opposition to this? And Tyler, for you, where does the opposition come from for this? So I guess Juniper first, then Tyler.
Yeah, in terms of obstacles or pushback from anybody, it was more so, this was nobody in the class had any experience doing something like this. And so kind of in the beginning stages of the research, it was intimidating to think about even getting on the agenda for a public comment session, which is the first step to being on the docket for a resolution like this. And I remember having a conversation with my group, just being like, I don't know, like this might take months for us to even get, it doesn't seem accessible. It might take months for us to even have a public comment session, which, tried not to let that deter us, but we were definitely it was something we were keeping in mind. And but I found that and I think my classmates similarly, that everyone was so excited for this. I think that the Animas River and the community that it cultivates in Durango is they're all, for the most part, on board with this kind of work.
And Tyler, so and Jessica had a question that was probably similar, but she said, Juniper, was there a common topic that caused hesitation in the community that would about recognizing the rights of the river?
Um, yeah, I think that there was some maybe not misunderstanding, but you know, worry that this kind of initiative would have legal repercussions for the people in Durango who have water rights, that like suing or like legal action would follow this. But we just really emphasized, that this is more of a first step in the city council centering the animus in their decision making.
So Tyler, so for the follow-up question, like where does the opposition come from to these initiatives? So the usual players, the usual suspects?
Yeah, great question. Looking from like a historical vantage point, we're dealing with a few hundred years of entrenched ideology in, or we could say entrenched stories that have been told time and again that are cultural or religious, political or economic, that separate the human from the rest of the Earth community, and not only separate humans from Earth and disrupt that relationship, but also place humans as superior over all others. And of course, within our own species, there's that great chain of being that's been around for a couple millennia that positions certain types of humans as superior to other kinds of humans, and so on. And so it's this really wicked problem that's woven together of bad stories that have been told numerous times. I think there's a skepticism of these ideas, and I wonder if Juniper, you've encountered that, where some people may wonder why should a river have rights, or why should we speak of other species as subjects or even as legal persons? I could just rattle off a number of questions that I've encountered, such as will ascribing rights to other beings remove human rights? And again, that's where the intertwining of human and more than human rights is a key to recognize. There's the question of, well, how do we know that other beings even have an inner life? How do we know that other beings feel pain or feel at all, or and that ties into this sort of scientific reductionism that wants to view humans as the only ones who have an inner world. And yet here across the screen, I can't verifiably prove the inner world of either one of you. And yet here we are having relationships and bountiful conversation. And I think the last comment I'll say is getting back to stories of domination, stories of competition rather than cooperation and collaboration. We could look at different interpretations of religious texts or stories that could go either way. The same text could go one way or another, either towards cooperation and reciprocal relationship, or towards competition and domination. And I believe that one of the challenges we face is telling better stories and living those stories, just as Juniper, you and your class have been demonstrating for us.
And that kind of leads into this next question from Peg, but also probably Tom Carr, which is what is the biggest obstacle do you think that people have to see and accept that the more than human have rights? And I think to a certain extent, you sort of hit on it, is that we have this sort of supremacist, dominating way of thinking about all of life on this planet. And as long as we keep doing that, it's going to be very hard for them to recognize that. But I think stories and sort of the study of the sacred text are two key pieces of that. What are your thoughts, the two of you?
Sure. I'll hop in real quick. Um, what comes to mind is, well, one of the reasons why we included scientific literature and scientific voices within the Living Earth Community project is that for many people of this era, especially those who are still influenced from Enlightenment thinking all these centuries later, and myself included, there's much that I'm still unlearning and relearning and so on. But one of the reasons we included scientific voices is that the world of animal studies, the world of looking into the sentience or cognition or the relationships of more than human species is booming right now. There are Project SETI out in California is using AI technology to translate the language of sperm whales. And at this point, they've been working on this for years, but at this point, they have come to at least a basic alphabet, I believe, of sperm whale language. And so that's just one example. We look to the different types of experiences and expressions of, say, a dog, or the emotional relational depth of a type of parrot, or we go on down the list. Bees able to teach one another culture, a very specific kind of bee culture. But still, if we were to be honest and open with the world around us, and curious, and honestly humble ourselves a bit as individuals and persons, I think we would be amazed at what the Earth community is already teaching us, already inviting us to live into, if we would just sit, sit, listen, and try to listen to a different story or stories being told all around us. I'm curious, Juniper, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it was really interesting what you mentioned earlier, just the idea that of like the scarcity pie kind of situation where if rights are given to non-human entities, that something will be taken away from humans. And that's just, absolutely not true in the way that I see it. And it's just like the idea of kind of a gift society, I think, of like there's the earth systems that we exist within provide so much for us, and deserve, without whether or not they provide anything to us. I think that, the idea that they deserve to exist and to flourish, and all the things we've talked about today, that that's something that, everybody on earth should, everybody and every non-human thing deserves.
Tyler, John Grimm wants to know, say, drawing on your distinction between Earth law and the rights of nature, could you see the Roar work exploring Earth law going forward?
That's a great question, John. I get the sense that there's already elements of that, and Juniper, please correct me where I'm off with this. What I was hearing from your presentation is a restoring of relationships and a generous giving to other beings, as well as other members of your own human communities. The practice of sitting with the same waters as a way of um, listening, learning. I don't want to say befriending, but developing a relationship and showing up. That's what relationships are. It's showing up over and over. And then the ways that your class and big kudos to Professor Becky Clausen as well for envisioning this class. That's fantastic. Um, the cultivating of relationships with local indigenous groups, the door to door, it sounds like relationship building in your own neighborhoods and so on. What I'm hearing is already a human and more than human way of um, ag- acknowledging the rights and intrinsic value that all already possess, that all already are embodying. And from that, from that vision or from that perception, then you are going into the legal systems and engaging civically how to move the legal frameworks to then recognize these intrinsic rights and value. So I already see seed sprouting in that. And yeah, John, thank you for the question. And Juniper, that's any thoughts on that one, the earth law, rights of nature relationship?
Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of kind of that relationship that like you said, is already kind of emerging. And that was like a big goal of our work was to foster and rebuild the relationships between humans and between non-human Earth systems. So, oh, there go the lights again.
So, Peter actually has a question. How do the rights of nature and nature personhood laws facilitate the need for a dedicated advocate? Um, is so at the city council level, is this person appointed or elected, or how is it? And this actually kind of feeds into another question that I had, which is what is the city council of Durango currently, where are they on developing their policies and programs? But back to Peter's initial question is how, do we have to have a dedicated advocate to make sure this happens? And then also, how are conflicts of interests addressed? Because you wouldn't want that person to necessarily be the executive of the mining company or whatnot, you know?
Yeah, I think that's such a like a complicated thing to think about is the goal of this was giving a voice to the river, but who is that voice and who represents the river, and like you said, unbiasedly, it's kind of supports its functions, and that's something that we explored a little bit in that class, and that we're talking about at Earth Law, as well as the idea of like guardianship and appointing a guardian. And I think that ultimately, I don't know if there's is one singular person that could kind of represent the overarching needs for both the river and for the people that exist, within that watershed. Yeah, I think that's a super something I'd really like to explore more. And I think it would be a great appointing somebody like that, kind of to just be there to remind city council, you have this obligation. How does this new development project impact the river? And I think that it's really, a good way of holding city councilors and decision makers, you know, holding them accountable to continue that work. And that's really what I'm hoping to continue with, by working with the Water Center and the monitoring organizations within Durango. I hope that we can produce a report, and I'm planning to reach out to city councilors to ask them in what format and with what content the report would be most meaningful and impactful to them, and then also how would they take that into account, and how would that impact their decision making, and making sure that it does.
And so Tyler, so just to draw on your, have you seen governments and organizations appointing or, establishing a dedicated advocate for this?
Yes. Something I would say, a bit tongue in cheek, is what might be helpful is looking for the peoples or communities who have least contributed to the exploitation and destruction of more than human beings. But I think of the Maori in Aotearoa, New Zealand, who are the legal custodians of the Wanganui River. And so they have been able, even through the injustices and harms of colonization, they have maintained a strong degree of their traditional ways of relating to the river and the ecosystem, and being the ones who really pressed forward this rights of nature movement or the initiative. I think it was a natural fit for them to be placed in that custodianship, because they are on the ground. They are in the vicinity. They are not just saying that they value relationships, but they are actively giving and reciprocating in those relationships. Another one that comes to mind in the US here is the White Earth Band of Ojibwe in Minnesota, which is my home state, who recognize the rights of Menomin, wild rice, in the many lakes up north. And so they have not only led the initiative towards this legal movement, which I believe is the first law recognizing the rights of plants. I'd have to double check that globally, but at least nationally, I believe so. And because they, again, are living amongst and reciprocating with, and in very real ways, putting their lives on the line for the lives of others, even this seed-bearing grassy reed. I believe that the relationship is really what leads to a continued custodianship. But it's a great question, and that's an area I have much to learn about, because that's not something that I have. I'm not a legal custodian of any of this, and I'm curious how those types of mechanisms work in
Sure, absolutely. I mean, one thing, this is good segue. One of the things that iRegen does is provide some education around the different state legislative policies and that sort of thing. And one thing I have certainly learned is getting the bill passed is the first step, getting it implemented is really the second step. And, so continued vigilance and just sort of understanding the process is super important. And this brings me to my next question, which is one of the things that's actually proposed. Connecticut's legislative session starts tomorrow. It's a short session. The Environmental Rights Amendment is going to be proposed. And so this is different from rights of nature. And it is, so someone gave me the definition in here, right? So give residents, people, the right to a clean and healthy air, water, soil, ecosystems, and a safe climate. And so this person was wondering, I wonder what kind of pushback we would get if we tried to also include more than humans in that amendment as well. And so can you talk a little bit about the difference between the Environmental Rights Amendment? I mean, I think the obvious difference is it is really sort of restricted to the right of people for all of these things that actually, and not that they're not, there's obviously a lot of areas of agreement and understanding, but they're pretty different. But can you talk a little bit about how those things might interact?
Juniper, did you want to go first, or myself?
I think you should take the floor. I don't honestly.
And no, actually, and also to clarify, the push is to get this added to the Connecticut Constitution. So it's really just the current bill, I believe, at least last year's it was just to get it to a referendum so that the Connecticut voters could decide. Like, it's not even something the legislators have to decide on. We just would like to vote on it. But so yeah, Tyler, if you've any knowledge on this and you understand it, it is like different enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you made a good point that the language of this proposed amendment is still human centered. It's looking for, in essence, clean air, clean water for humans, or clean resources, we might call it. Resources is one of those words that we're kind of sticky with, but it still positions the legal questions around what is best for the humans locally. And so I would love to see an earth law infusion that asked what is also good for the rivers? What is good for the oh, if we really want to go there, the microbial beings in the soil. I'm in New Haven, Connecticut here, and there's so much toxic material in the soils, which have become a very serious eco-justice issue for decades. Predominantly brown, black, and impoverished communities have faced this. What if we had an amendment that said we are seeking what is most beneficial to human communities and the mycorrhizal networks, or the worms, whatever it might be? Maybe a more realistic one could be the river systems and PFAS, forever chemicals. What if an amendment were to ask or to propose that a river has the right to not be impeded, to participate in regenerative processes, and to have a healthy habitat? Then we're not just saying how can we provide clean water for humans, but how can we provide a way for water itself, the rivers themselves, to exist and in their own river ways flourish.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting. And I mean, one of the interesting things about the Environmental Rights Amendment is that Connecticut has, I think, one of the highest inequities, income and other. We have environmental justice communities. So the Environmental Rights Amendment, focusing on humans, would definitely address a lot of those issues. But it's very interesting to think about how we could incorporate the more than human in this work, which brings me, it's 8:28, so we really have time for one last question. So Maura Murray said, this perfect last question. Thanks, Maura. How can everyday people meaningfully support or participate in Earth Law movements?
I would love to hear from Juniper, because you and your class gave us such a sparkling example of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That is such a great question. And I think that without much knowledge of it, it can seem kind of inaccessible. Like, if you don't know a ton about law, and if you're not coming from an institution which educates you on that kind of thing. But there's so many ways of, I think that it's important to kind of understand and mend that relationship between yourself and nature, and recognizing the intrinsic values that nature has, and taking yourself out of the equation, and informing your friends and family about what would something like this look like, and implementing it. I think it can be applied to every kind of institution that you might be a part of, and I think that recognizing the interconnectedness between ourselves and nature, and maybe not removing ourselves from that equation, but recognizing that nature is an integral part of that. And yeah, I think that's a good first step.
Great. Tyler, what do you think?
Yeah, what comes to mind is examining our relationships to our human neighbors and our more than human neighbors, and looking at those three rights that Thomas Berry had written about: the right to exist, the right to a healthy habitat, and the right to participate in the regenerative processes of the Earth systems, and examining or questioning who is losing out on one or multiple of those, and how can I show up in this relationship to simply learn more and have a conversation and build a relationship, and then through the getting to know this other person, this other being, then examining maybe some larger systems that are causing the loss of rights or causing the obstruction of rights. So relationship building is, I think, central, and then from there,
Always key.
challenging systems that are destroying relationships.
So does Earth Law Center or the Living Earth community, since you obviously both do Earth law and rights of nature, do you have any resources for people that might want to start looking at this work in their own community, whether it's an animal or a river or the shoreline or something like that?
We do. On the Living Earth community website, we have hundreds. So just a quick context here. We have gathered all these resources onto the website and provided a larger bibliography. So in the Earth Law section on the website, we've got hundreds of examples and articles, case studies, videos, interviews from around the world with folks exploring Earth law. And then the fuller bibliography, continent by continent, has a somewhere around 80-ish, 60-ish pages of material for folks. So it's a wealth of resources that I would encourage folks just look at it and see what piques your interest, and then know that that's just the beginning of the journey.
Awesome.
Yeah, and Earth Law Center definitely has a lot of resources for that. Their website would be a great place to start. There's several blog posts that have been written by staff members and past interns regarding those initiatives. And I recently published one for the North American Indian Women's Association, and they just passed a resolution for the long person at the Eastern Band Cherokee. That was the council that yeah, there's a lot of great resources there. And
great. So I will, folks, for those, I will be sending out links and these presentations in PDF form for everyone, and this webinar will be up on our YouTube channel and on our website, so you can watch it again. So thank you so much for our presenters, Tyler, Juniper. Thank you so much for your presentation, your time tonight. We are so grateful for you and just grateful for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much. So excited to have been here and grateful to have this platform.
That's great.
Likewise. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Juniper, and everybody who tuned in.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all so much.